it's only 1 week where it doesn't follow Salah right away. Next week, inshallah, actually no, I'm wrong. Daylight changes on Sunday, so next week will also be at maybe an hour after Dhuhr, which is 2 o'clock. But the last couple of weeks, inshallah, will be aligned with Dhuhr prayer. So you can come here, pray Dhuhr, and we start, inshallah ta'ala. What we got to, let's review a little bit what we got to last week. So, by the way, the attendance sheets for the sisters is with the sisters, brothers, inshallah, when we finish, you can sign in. What we covered, can somebody tell us what we covered last week? What did we cover last week? Okay, we talked about tashkil. Yeah, how the Qur'anic script evolved from the time of Uthman radiallahu anh until basically us, in terms of the actual text, right? So the addition of the diacritical marks and the harakat and the dots, the dotting system, came to make sure that people are reading the Quran properly, because after the time of Uthman radiallahu anh, we knew that there are people, as we mentioned with Abu Aswad al-Du'ali, the story where he was with somebody who was reading from Surah At-Tawbah, and he read the verse incorrectly, أَنَّ اللَّهَ بَرِيءٌ مِّنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, and he said it, وَرَسُولِهِ. Of course, there was no tashkil at the time, but that changes the meaning quite drastically, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distances himself from the disbelievers, and the way that this man read it was, he distances himself from the disbeliever and his prophet, ﷺ, which is a destruction in meaning by all means. And so, what's the difference? The word is the same, it's just the harakat, right? Instead of وَرَسُولِهِ, it's وَرَسُولُهُ, which means that Allah and His Prophet ﷺ distanced themselves away from the disbelievers. And so this is where it all started. We talked about that extensively last week. We showed examples of how the Quran, photos of the Quran, how it looked like from the Uthmani Kufic script. So we also talked about the writing materials. We talked about the script. Do you remember the two scripts that date back to Uthman radiallahu anh? Yes, Kufi and Hijazi, right? We talked about the differences between both. We talked also a little bit about how the masahif, so Uthman radiallahu anh standardized the mushaf and also made, we said, about 5 to 7 masahif that are considered standards, and he sent them out to the different regions. Now, what is beautiful about some of these masahif is that they cater to multiple qira'at at the same time. Obviously, we know that, from what we talked about last week, is that you can have the same word and it's pronounced differently from different qira'at. The only thing that changes, again, is the tashkil, right? There are qira'at where there's, and so there's text based on the Uthmani standard that don't have, or have huruf, letters that are there or not there. So, for example, one of the surah or the ayat we read last week, وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ, and in another qira'ah, سَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. The only difference is the wa. Does that change the meaning? It does not. But this is how the qira'ah came down. And of course, we're going to talk about the qira'at, inshallah, in the near future. And then we talked about how the masahif were, how they were different, how they differed. We talked about the old manuscripts of the Quran. And then we got to the point where there are a few slides I'm not going to cover. They are in the notes from last week. We ran out of time last week. But it talked about where some of these scripts ended up. So we said that there was a script sent to Damascus, from Uthman radiallahu anh, right? A standard copy. We talked about there was a copy that went to Medina, right? And then, different places. And so the slides from last week, again, just due to the time and the fact that we're actually even starting late today, we're not going to cover. They're in your slides. If you want more information, we can, during our one-on-ones, we can talk about it as well, or feel free to research it yourself. But the slides have some of that information on where these manuscripts ended up, what happened to them. The only one I'll maybe just talk about briefly, because people ask the question and they say, are there any copies left of the Mus'haf from Sayyidina Uthman's time? And the answer is there's no full version of the Quran from Sayyidina Uthman's time. There are remnants or pages that are left. And these are, one of them is in the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul. Has anybody gone to it, by the way? Yes, have you seen it? Yeah, so one is preserved there. Did you notice the Kufi script? You didn't realize at the time. So the Kufic script, as we said, is it's heavy in terms of the letters are thick, but in terms of how much Quran is in a particular page, it's light in its density, basically. So it's kind of stretched out versus the Hijazi script. There was a copy, the Samarkand copy that from the time of Sayyidina Uthman. That's where one of the copies went. And it was considered to be the oldest Quran copy in existence, along with the what they call the Blue Quran, which is the one in Istanbul. It came to Samarkand in 890 Hijri, so that's about 1485, and remained there till about 1868. So about 400 years or so. And then it was taken to St. Petersburg, Russia, in 1869. I don't think this is the information there yet. So this is not pertaining to the slide, but this is kind of more just extra information. And then it remained there in St. Petersburg until about 1917. And then, there's some accounts. The Russian Orientalists gave a detailed description of this copy, saying that there's many pages that were missing or damaged. And then it was taken back to the capital of Uzbekistan in 1924, and it's been there ever since. How do we know it's the oldest copy, or one of the oldest copies, if not the oldest? It's written on parchment from Gazelle, and so that's evidence that that's what they were using back then. It's the same old Kufic script as the time of Uthman radiallahu anh, in the 1st century of Hijrah. And then it didn't have the diacritical marks and the dotting. These were, remember we talked about them last week, they were introduced in the 8th decade of the 1st century. And so it must have been before that. It must have been before that. And it also didn't, so it didn't have the voweling either. So that's a little bit about the Samarkand copy. And so I mention it because it's considered to be the oldest, one of the oldest, if not the oldest copy that remains with us today. Any questions on this before we go into today's material? Okay, we're good? No, sorry. So I have the slides here. I think it's hard to see from the back. We put the blinds down. If you still have a hard time, sisters specifically, what we can do is we can have the brothers shift up a little bit and the sisters move up a little bit too, if you're having a hard time seeing. If you're happy, you can see, you have strong eyesight, you're more than welcome to stay where you are, but just an offer, yani, inshallah. Okay. What happened to the Mus'haf of Abu Bakr? Do you guys remember we talked about that? What happened? Yes? Was it destroyed? Yeah, it was destroyed. So after Abu Bakr radiallahu anh passed away, it was given to Umar radiallahu anh as the Khalifa. And then when Umar passed away, radiallahu anh, it went to who? Hafsa, his daughter, the Prophet ﷺ's wife. And she was very protective over it, as we know. And then after her death, it was burnt, so that it doesn't cause people any potential discrepancy, because again, now we have a standard to go by, and that's Uthman. So anything before the standard, if there are any differences for whatever reason, then people will say, but this is older, and it will cause confusion. And so that was destroyed, and we know that the Uthmani copy is now what we call the original. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the Quran in print. So when we say in print, we're talking about printed in text, right? So it's no longer handwritten per se, it's printed. Now printing back then, when we're talking about 16th century, it's not like now where you have HP laser printers and people can just make copies as much as they want, right? Back then, they used a wooden block methodology. Anybody familiar with the wooden blocks? So what they used to do is they used to carve. So they would write in calligraphy in a particular script. Could be Hijazi, could be Kufi. They would carve it into wooden blocks, and then they would ink the wooden blocks, and then they would stamp pages. Right? That's how print was back in the day. There are apparently some specimens from as early as the 10th century where they were used. They used this block approach. I think that the term is xylography or something like that. XYLOGRAPHY. And then in the 16th century, it became into more of what they call movable blocks, the movable type. And what is that? It's now, what they started to do is to carve individual letters, and then this way they can start using the same letter in different places. So the scene here looks like the scene here, and the scene here, it's more standard, versus writing out the whole mushaf, right? You're just basically writing the individual letters, how they're connected. It could be at the beginning of the word, middle of the word, end of the word, because some letters change how they look. And so they would just use that, ink them, and then basically through moving them, get the words and the ayat in print. Again, now I guess we can appreciate a little bit more how technology has advanced, and it's facilitated many things. And of course, we will see the remnants of that at the end of this topic. This copy here that you see is from 1787. Again, it may not be clear if you're in the back, this is the St. Petersburg Mus'haf, and you can see here, it's probably not very clear on, it's probably too small. I tried to make it big, but this was used, this was again using the movable blocks that we talked about. No, you can try to zoom in if you want. The first printed copy was in Venice, actually 1530. That copy was destroyed by the papal authorities. So these are a Christian group led by the Pope at the time. Yeah, it's still not very clear, but that's okay. The notes are available to you, inshallah, or they will be made available, so you can look at it at your own time. And then that copy is no longer around. The second copy that was printed that still exists was printed in Hamburg, Germany. And then the first Quran printed by Muslims is the one that you see there. That's the one from St. Petersburg in 1787. And then there are other copies printed as well after that in different areas. I think if you actually go to the next slide, you will see some of them. Yes, so the copy on the left, where it says Qur'ani, this is by Abraham Hinkelmann, and he was a German Orientalist, theologian as well, and he printed actually this copy. He wasn't Muslim. He printed one of the earliest copies of the Quran in Europe. This one's 1694. It was purely Arabic in text. There was no translation and there was no commentary. It contained errors and it was based on incomplete or flawed manuscripts. So later scholars, one of them is actually, which he was also he was a Catholic priest, but he was also a scholar in Qur'anic script, or Islamic studies, I should say. Marachi, he was Italian. He criticized Hinckelmann's copy for its lack of scholarly rigor. The one to the right is Marachi's copy, or his print. He studied Islam, although he was a Catholic priest, and his work was one of the most detailed and scholarly Christian studies of the Quran. But you can see here that was again from the 17th century. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the Kazan Mus'haf, 1803. You can see how, just trying to appreciate a little bit of how things, how the Masahif look like. And then Hafiz Osman's copy during the Ottoman Empire, 1877. It's not very clear here. Yeah, I apologize. Maybe I can just brighten the photos before I paste them in next time. Yeah, so let's just, we can move on, inshallah. Okay, and then, so there was a well-known saying that the Quran was revealed in Al-Hijaz, written in Turkey and recited in Egypt. You know, it was a well-known saying, but that didn't limit people in Egypt, Muslims in Egypt, to just recite the Quran. We knew that a lot of the Quran reciters and scholars came from that country or that region, but they also printed the Quran. And here's a copy of the Mus'haf that was popular. This is, I think, the end of Surah Hud and the beginning of Surah Yusuf. Some of you may have seen copies like this, by the way. This is by the famous calligrapher Abdul Khaliq Haqqi. What was unique about it is that it conformed to the written form of the Uthmani Mus'haf. So, of course, it has harakat, tashkil, and diacritical marks, but it resembled the old Uthmani Mus'haf from the calligraphy perspective. Yeah, and it was based on the reading of Hafs and Asim, which is what's popular in Egypt. Next slide, please. So Saeed Nursi from Turkey, a lot of his followers also took it upon themselves to print the Quran in his beautiful calligraphy. This is based on the calligraphy of actually another famous Turkish calligrapher, Hamid, and it was printed in 1947, and then since then it's been produced, basically been used as a copy to produce larger amounts, so it's more of a standard copy for printing, various sizes and different presses, by the followers of Saeed Nursi, who are actually based in West Berlin or Germany. A little bit of history of the print. So next slide, please. Now, we're very familiar, a lot of us, with the King Fahd copy. At the time, I don't know if they still do it now. Whenever you used to go to Hajj, at least when I used to go back in the day, they used to give all the Hujjaj free copies of the Mus'haf. Do they still do that? No, they don't, but they do it if you go to the actual museum. Okay. Yeah, no, this was on the plane on your way out. Basically boxes and boxes of Masahif, and every person leaving Jeddah or in Medina as well would get a copy of the Mus'haf. But we've all become very familiar with the Mus'haf of this Mus'haf, which we find amongst us even today. This started in 1948, and what it's called the Meccan Mus'haf. It's written by the famous calligrapher Sheikh Muhammad Tahir al-Kurdi. It's obviously gone through a rigorous process of scholars checking it. And then another mushaf was published in Jeddah a couple of decades later. And then what Hisham, I think, is talking about is the printing press. So a complex for printing the mushaf for both, obviously locally and internationally, was established in Saudi, in Medina in 1984. And it produces masahif in many languages, I think over 50 spoken languages. So it is the biggest printing service for printing the mushaf. Yes?
But it says Tahir al-Kurdi wrote this as a calligraphy. Does it mean he like wrote it by hand and then they made blocks out of it?
No, there's no blocks anymore, right? Now you have computer technology, right?
Like a photocopy almost?
To be honest, like how it was translated from written to actually becoming like an electronic version, I don't know. Like I'm not that sophisticated to tell you. It'd be interesting to check it to see how. But yeah, I'd encourage you to figure it out and let us know next week if that's okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's ways. I mean, they didn't have what we have now, where you can literally take any document and take a picture and it becomes a PDF, right? But yeah, I think there was some level of technology involved. Next slide, please. Some other major institutions for printing the Quran. So there are other ones. So in the Indian subcontinent, in Lahore, the Taj Company produced the mushaf that you see on your left-hand side. There is one in Morocco, the one in the middle, is more of a Maghribi. It's not as popular, but it's, I don't know if many reach international locations, but it's certainly there. And then there's one from basically the African House Mushaf, the one on the very right. So you can see there's similarities between the Eastern Masahif and the Western Masahif. The North African ones, though, the Mushafs are distinguished by their North African calligraphy. Again, it's very hard to see. I think it's because just we're during the daytime. Usually these are clearer. I don't know. The notes is clear. Yeah, that's why I'm saying go to the notes and see it, inshallah. The African calligraphy or script is called, known as Mabsut. That's what it's called. And it's in the riwayah of Warsh, so the recitation of Warsh. And I think it started somewhere at the end of the 19th century. So a little bit more kind of diversity in the print of the Quran you find across the world. Next slide, please. So modern day. So what about today? And I think it's quite. So people might think that we stopped kind of the Quran is printed, it's done. There's no other ways that we can simplify its recitation for the masses and teaching it. There are actually. So can you just scroll down a little bit? No, you can't? Okay. No problem. Yeah, maybe if you, well, no, that's not going to work. That's fine, inshallah. The notes will have it. But so there are different copies that are being printed right now. The one on the top there, you'll see the very top right. Well, before we get to the printing, the recording of the Quran in audio, right? That recording and broadcasting it to people, the first recording was 1960 in the voice of Sheikh al-Husari, which I think everybody knows. And if you ever want to learn how to recite the Quran properly with the right tajweed, Husari is your reciter. Okay, that was the first recording of rahimahullah, Imam al-Husari. There is some recordings claimed that the entire Mus'haf actually goes back a little bit before that to a person he was a professor by the name of Labib al-Sa'id. Nonetheless, the first audio was around that time, And it started obviously becoming very popular to listen to the Quran, not just to read it, from people who have beautiful recitations. There are different types of masahif as well. There's the Tahajjud Mus'haf. Does anybody have a copy of the Tahajjud Mus'haf? So this Mus'haf is, every hizb is 4 arba. You know how it's, basically one hizb is 4 arba, right? Now, the Mus'haf that you have now, the juz'a is how many pages? 20. The Tahajjud Mus'haf, the juz'a is fit into 8 pages, not 20. This way, when you're praying, you can pray 2 rak'at, because each page will have 2.5. Basically, 2.5 of what you're used to seeing in this mushaf. So each 2 pages will have 5 pages, which is basically a rubu'. And so you can complete a rubu', which is 2 rak'ahs, without turning the pages. Right? It's a big enough mushaf that you can put in front of you and read for tahajjud. And so you can read it without having to go and flip it while you're praying. That's one way it was printed. Another way that's very popular, it became popular, I think maybe I remember when I was younger, I started to see more of them, the Tajweed Mus'haf. So the Tajweed Mus'haf is color-coded for the different ahkam of Tajweed, which I think were, to me when I was younger, was like very helpful as you start to make sure you recite and memorize properly. There's also Mus'haf al-Qira'at. So this is a Mus'haf that has all of the Qira'at distinguished. So you can read the same, basically it'll tell you where the differences are, how do you recite each word differently based on the Qira'at, the 10 Qira'at that we'll talk about later inshallah. And then there's also the thematic Mus'haf, which is the very bottom there, it's cut off. But it basically color codes sections of the Mus'haf to tell you this is this section, this is the story, this section talks about this. So you can tell that it's a beginning and end of a section based on the color of the paragraph or the page, or you see here purple and orange to highlight to different sections within the same surah because they have different topics essentially. Interesting, subhanAllah, right? Creativity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that we're able to utilize these things to help people not only read but understand. And it's actually quite incredible that not only has the Mus'haf been printed in different qira'at and scripts, but is also now being printed in Braille. SubhanAllah. It's quite beautiful. And this is again the Ministry of Religious Affairs in Saudi released a 3-volume Quran written in Arabic Braille. And so each dot, each harakah is taken care of by Braille. And so not only the letters, but all of the harakat and tashkil is there to help those who cannot see, which again is a beautiful advancement. Anybody seen a Braille Quran, by the way, before? Braille? No. You know what I'm talking about when I say Braille? Do people know what that? Okay, so Braille is basically, if you actually even go to the elevators, you'll see it. You'll see under each number, you'll see basically points sticking out in different ways. Those points for people who can't see, they based on touch and feel, they can based on how they're arranged, they can tell which number or which letter that is. So they can read the Quran just by touching it. I find it just fascinating that they did that with the Quran. It's just incredible. Any questions on print of the Quran before we move on to different topic? Yes.
Well, so the Abraham Hinkleman's edition was printed. So you mentioned that it was criticized for not having followed a scholarly approach, and it was copied from incorrect manuscripts. So this was in 1600. So are there still, or will there still manuscripts with incorrect?
No, it's not that they were wrong manuscript. We said there was manuscripts that were partially destroyed, missing pages, right? It may come from that, and he may have taken it from. There are. Don't forget, there are still people during this time that are trying to call it contaminate or change, right? The Mus'haf. But it's been protected because you have a lot of people who memorize it and a lot of copies that if it doesn't match with your standard copy, we don't take it, right? So I don't know where he got his sources from, but he didn't get them from the standard copies or copies that were made from the copies of the standard. Nothing that traces back to Uthman radiallahu anh, is what I'm saying. So I don't know his methodology of collection, but they found errors, right? And it doesn't have to be by intentional. Like, people could try to say, you know what, I want to write the Mus'haf, I want to write the Quran, and they make mistakes, and you know what I mean? The point is, that is not something that people will take as a Mus'haf because, well, it's got errors. You always compare it with the standard. Doesn't match the standard, you don't take it. But because now you have so many standards, even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you had thousands of people who memorized it, but now over time the print has become, we're talking in the order of maybe hundreds of millions, if not billions of copies, right? You can tell right away that this is wrong. So he must have gotten it from somewhere, but he, it was criticized for the lack of accuracy. You had another question?
Yeah, I was just more curious. So when you have these things and you call it as additions, like what is an addition? Like Mullah addition and
It's just based on the style of writing. It's the style of the script, how it's written, in what calligraphy. Not only the calligraphy, but it's kind of like, think about like as font size and type and style, right? Those are what we call the editions. It's not like, oh, they came up with their own mushaf, right? It's still based on. Yeah, no, it's not like that. It's basically just a different style of print. Same. Nothing changes in the mushaf. The mushaf is the same. The words are the same. The letters are the same. Nothing changes. It's just you and I. We take a document, we print it. You used Times Roman. I used something else, and you used size 12. I used size 10. But it's obviously written differently. That's the difference. Yes.
And I think in different editions, where you stop in between the ayahs, that is different as well.
That depends on the qira'ah. Yeah, we'll talk about stopping in the next topic, actually. Yes. That's not based on the person writing it, saying, I'm going to stop here and start here. That's based on the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba. Yes.
When it comes to like the different companies that are like making these different editions, is there like a regulatory body or something that oversees it?
There's many scholars. So even when things are printed in the complex in Medina, you still have scholars. I don't know how many scholars. I don't know the process, but you have many of them that read every single copy, make sure there's no issue with the printing itself. Because printers can mess up. Nothing is perfect. Of course, they likely have the best printers in the world. Yeah, it's checked. Every copy is checked multiple times. I don't know the process though in detail. I'd like to go, inshallah, and find out because I think it's fascinating, but I'm not sure. Okay, can we go to 6 then, and then this way I don't have to ask you to or trouble you to move through the slides, inshallah. طيب. Now that we are on to the next topic, I'd like to talk about forms and divisions of the text in the Mus'haf. What is the smallest? What is the shortest division of the Quran? When you look at Quran, how it's divided, what's the shortest division? An ayah, right? An ayah is the shortest building block, if you will, or the smallest building block of the Quran. Did you not see it? Okay. طيب. Linguistically, the word ayah has many meanings. Can somebody give me what the word ayah means? Say it again? Sign. Okay. What else? So a sign or indication. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and for as one example, وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِهِ أَن يَأْتِيَكُمُ التَّابُوتِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah, when it's talking about the Bani Israel, does it work? Okay, perfect.
Or maybe not.
No? Well, it is, but just slow. Yeah. In this particular verse, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that the Prophet of Bani Israel is saying a sign of his kingship. Ayata mulkihi. All right. In this case, ayah means a sign or an indication. What's another meaning of ayah? It's admonition or a lesson, right? So yeah, so actually the ayat are here. So I don't have to necessarily remember. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, when it's talking about the produce that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in the Quran. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةٍ. It also means miracle. وَإِذَا بَدَّلْنَا آيَةً مَكَانَ آيَةٍ. Sorry, that's the next one. سَلْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ كَمْ آتَيْنَاهُمْ مِنْ آيَةٍ بَيِّنَةٍ. Ask the children of Israel how many clear signs has come to them. This is still not working. Can I just trouble you to click? We need to invest in a new clicker. Just click a few times if you don't mind. So it can mean a miracle as well, and a verse or a... Okay, perfect. Jazakallah khair. Yes, that's perfect. A verse or a sentence, as we are talking about the smallest unit of the Quran. وَإِذَا بَدَّلْنَا آيَةً مَكَانَ آيَةٍ. So if we've replaced an ayah with another ayah. So technically in Islamic sciences or ulum al-Quran, the word ayah means it's the smallest part of the Quran composed of letters and words. Okay? And that is separated from what's before it and after it. So there's distinction in when it starts and when it finishes. And it's obviously in a surah. Why is it important to know when an ayah starts and stops? Yes. To complete the meaning, right? What else? Why is it important to know when an ayah starts or stops? To complete the meaning, yes. To start and complete the meaning, yes. Why else? Okay. But, I mean, ayat could be in the middle of a passage, right? But knowing where it starts and stops is important. Why else? Yes? Right, and goes back to the meaning. But also, when you start reading in your salah, right, you're not going to start in the middle of an ayah. You have to start at the beginning of an ayah, right? Right? So if you say, you can't say, وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ. No, you got to start at the beginning. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. Right? So for the rules of recitation, it's also important. Okay, yes. And then, of course, as Hisham mentioned, the meaning is very important. There are, when you stop, so starting is one thing, but when you stop, even to take a breath, right? Because you can't complete the whole ayah in one go because it's long. You have to know where you're stopping. Don't assume, okay, I could just stop anywhere and just go back a few words and continue. Because the stop that you could take could actually change the meaning, right? And there are different types of stops, the quality of stops. So kafi, so waqf tam, it's a perfect stop in terms of meaning and grammar. Kafi and hasan are acceptable. Qabih wouldn't. Qabih is ugly stop, which means it changes the meaning. So if you're saying something And sometimes you'll see a meme in the middle of the ayah, or a lam, right? Meme means you should stop, right? Lam says don't stop. And the lam says if you stop there, the meaning is going to be thrown off, right? So an example in Surah Yasin, قالوا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا, right? ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون. That's a bad stop, right? It's قبيح. It's من بعثنا من مرقدنا. Stop. هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون. So, you know, the meaning, who resurrected us, if you stop improperly, who resurrected us from our place of basically our graves, هذا, right, our place, this, and then ما وعد الرحمن, Allah did not promise. But that's not the meaning, right? It's who resurrected us from our place, stop. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised us. Right? So you see the difference? Change the meaning. And there's many examples in the Quran. Nonetheless, this is why it's important to know when the ayah starts or stops. We gave you an example of the middle of an ayah, but now you can appreciate for the full ayah. Okay? And of course, it's for you to, and the ease of finding where each section starts. So there are two opinions on the location of the beginning and the end of each ayah. First opinion is that it's from the Prophet ﷺ, and which he taught the companions. And there's numerous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he clearly mentions particular verses and surah. So when he does the ﷺ, you know that that's an ayah, right? For example, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever memorizes the last 10 ayat of Surah Al-Kahf will be saved from the tribulation of a Dajjal, right? The last 10. And he would recite them ﷺ. So you knew the last 10, right? You know which one, when they start and finish. The other opinion is that it's mostly from the Prophet ﷺ, and some is based on the scholars of the Salaf, meaning there is some level of ijtihad or reasoning, and this is the stronger opinion. And so this is why you will see in the Mus'haf different, where an ayah would stop, and in one Mus'haf it wouldn't in another. So I'll give you an example. In Surah Ibrahim, كتاب أنزل إليك كتاب أنزلناه إليك لتخرج الناس من الظلمات إلى النور. There's masahif that stop there. I think in Hafs and Asim Mus'haf it doesn't stop there. It continues. There's no stop. Okay? And that's based on the second opinion. Well, it's supported by the second opinion, where the Prophet ﷺ, if he stopped regularly at a place, they didn't have those symbols, right? They didn't have those symbols in the Mus'haf. Those were added later to make it easy for us again. But when the Prophet ﷺ would always stop at particular places, that there's no discussion. This is an ayah and it stops here. Where he ﷺ sometimes would stop, sometimes he would continue, there's a difference of opinion. Okay? So that's where you would see the difference of opinion. Is he ﷺ taking a stop to get his breath back? Or is he stopping because it's an end of the ayah? If he did some of it this way, some of it this way, this is where the difference of opinion lies. Okay? So even when ijtihad is used though, there were certain rules that scholars used to determine the ayah. It's not just, well, let's, it has to also follow a rigorous rule system. So for example, the average length of the ayat surrounding it. If you have small ayat, right, and all of a sudden you have a long one, that there's discrepancy, is it this an ayah or is it shorter? Scholars will say, well, based on the rhythm, based on the length, and then they will make a decision on where the ayah would stop. Okay? So based on the length of the surrounding ayat, based on the rhyme, the rhythm of the passage, the topic of the passage, etc. Okay? How many ayat are in the Mus'haf? How many ayat are in the Mus'haf? Anyone know? 6,000 and... well, there's 7 opinions, okay? So the Kufa copy, 6,236. That's the Hafs an Asim, basically, version. The one in Basra, 6,204. Dimashq 6,227. So they're all in the 6,200, right? There are slight differences in the number. Again, this is based on the different qira'at as well, right? Because some places where the qira'at stopped, or there's a difference of opinion, this is a regular stop or not. Nonetheless, after we've, this stopped moving. Oh, the clicker now works. All right. So there's differences when to stop or start, but there are rules to follow. Of course, the meaning can't change for that. And then the actual arrangement, though, does not change, okay? So please, please, please make sure you understand this. The words within the ayat, the letters do not change. We're just trying to figure out where a sentence, a verse, is stopping and where the next one's starting. The order is not changing, okay? Right? Any questions on this? There are different masahif again based on the qira'at. So the very first one, there was no. It wasn't a documented part where they put. Remember, we said this was later on, right? So there wasn't any indication to say where it stops or starts from the written perspective. Now they've memorized it and they would recite it in a certain way, and based on their citation, they knew that this is a stop and this is a start. But it wasn't in written form, okay, until later. Allahu a'lam. And let's go to the clicker. Okay, the clicker works. طيب. Other divisions of the Qur'anic text, of course, surah, after ayah, you get to surah. Surah, what does it mean? Or surah? Linguistically, it means row or fence. Basically, you have a fence, right? Surah starts, here's a fence. In technical language, it's the passage, it's a division of the passage of the Qur'anic text, what we call a chapter, or a part, that's set apart from the preceding or the following text. Of course, the surah word, determined by who? Who defined the surah? This surah starts here and ends here. Prophet ﷺ, right? Because what they did have is the basmalah, right? When a surah would finish, they had the basmalah, and so that's the start of a new surah. There's a basmalah before every surah except Tawbah, right? And this is why a lot of scholars, and because the meaning is the theme, not the meaning, but the theme is very close between Anfal and Tawbah, which are back to back, and there's no basmalah in the middle. Scholars often, when they're doing thematic tafsir, they actually lump them together into to say they're one surah, but their meaning, the approach, because they talk about jihad essentially in different perspectives. So that's about the surah. Yes. The names of the surah are given by the Prophet ﷺ. By the way, it's possible that a surah has multiple names. Okay, so Surah At-Tawbah is also called Surah Bara'ah, which is the first word. Ghafir also is called Al-Mu'min. Okay, Muhammad. Surah Muhammad. Does anybody know what the other name of Surah Muhammad is? Surah Al-Qital. Okay, so different. Not every surah has multiple names, but they may also be referred to in multiple ways, right? So Surah Al-Shams, for example, some scholars refer to it as وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا. Okay, طيب. So it's typically, the surah name is typically named after a story or a theme or a word in it. So Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, it's talking about the story of Sayyidina Musa and Bani Israel with the order of them to slaughter a baqarah or cow. Okay? The longest surah is Surah Al-Baqarah, the shortest surah is Surah Al-Kawthar. Okay? Right? Other surah, by the way, anybody interested in knowing other names of surah? Surah Al-Insan. Does anybody know Surah Al-Insan? What's it called? Other name? Yes, Surah Al-Dahr. Very good. What about Surah Al-Isra? Yes, Bani Israel. Very good. Very good. Jazakumullah khair. طيب. Let's move on. Again, if I'm moving too fast, please let me know. The number of surah and ayat in the Quran, there's 114 surah. That's fixed. There's no discrepancy about that. They're obviously unequal in length. The longest ones come at the beginning, and the shorter ones are later. The order of the ayat we talked about already, and the order of the surah, all of it was established by the Prophet ﷺ, and the guidance was given by Jibreel. And this was important the last year of the Prophet ﷺ's life, because Quran was revealed gradually, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ reviewed the Quran with Jibreel during Ramadan in his last year ﷺ twice. Now, in terms of how scholars look at the Quran, in terms of its other divisions, and one division is based on the length of the surah. So scholars have divided, for example, the Quran into 4 groups. The first is at-tiwal, or as-sab' at-tiwal. There's the 7 long ones. And that includes, obviously after Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Fatiha is not included. It includes Baqarah. What's after Baqarah? Al-Imran, Nisa, Ma'idah, An'am. After An'am, A'raf. So that's 6. And then you have Surah Al-Anfal, which is actually very short relative to what we just covered. And then you have Surah Tawbah, which is also now really long, like the first 6, right? And because there's no basmala between, the scholars have said Anfal and Tawbah are considered the 7th of the long 7. Because these 7 are drastically longer than anything else. And Surah Tawbah came in as much shorter than all of them, but there's no basmala after it to disconnect it necessarily from Tawbah, and so they've lumped it as, again, just to classify the groups. Sab'a Tawal is the first. The next group is Al-Mi'in. So Al-Mi'in is surah that have approximately 100 ayat, starting from Surah Yunus and on. So At-Tiwal, the word Tiwal means the lengthiest. Mi'in means 100, and that's why they call it Al-Mi'in. Okay? The next group is called Al-Mathani, and Mathani means repeated. So it's these surah are less than 100 ayat typically. Again, it's not every single one, and they are repeated. And then the last group is Al-Mufassal, which is the last section, which starts from Surah Qaf till the end, Surah An-Nas. And Al-Mufassal is basically disjointed or broken into fragments, and because they're much shorter. So that's one division that you might hear about of the Quran. Other divisions, Al-Juzu' or Juz', which means, how many ajza do we have? 30, right? And why is it 30? Was it set by the Prophet ﷺ? No. So Juz' means literally part or portion. The Quran was divided into 30 portions of approximately equal length, approximately 20 pages in the Mus'haf we have, for easy recitation, so that you can cover a Juz' a day during Ramadan for 30 days. Okay? Of course, the exception of this 20 pages in today's Mus'haf is the first Juz'. It's got 21 pages, because Surah Al-Fatiha, and the last Juz', which has about 23 pages, because there's a lot of smaller ones, small surahs. Some copies of the Quran have surahs divided in paragraphs called ruku'. Let me see if it's showing here. And it's, yes, there we go. No, first Hizb. What can I call about Hizb? Yes, so we'll do Hizb first. So Hizb, This is a different slide. I just going to make sure where am I. Yeah, I think I removed. This is an older slide. Okay, nonetheless. So each juz'u is broken up into 2 hizb. Okay, so 10 pages per hizb. So for example, if you see this notation, hizb, and you see ithnan or 2, that is to indicate that this is the second hizb, which you find in which surah? Baqarah, right? Because juz'u 1, for example, will have hizb 1, hizb 2. Juz'u 2 will have hizb 3, hizb 4, and so on, right? So this will tell you this is the start of the second hizb. Okay? Each hizb is subdivided into quarters, or rubu'. Okay? And you'll see. Okay, now none of them are working. There we go. So you'll see rubu' hizb, al-hizb, right? So that's how it would look like, a quarter. Nisf is half. Thalath arba' is 3/4, and then you typically see this symbol here. I don't know if this is going to work. Yeah, this symbol here to start. You've probably seen it, right? In the text. That starts a new hizb, or new quarter. So this is another breakdown of the Qur'an. Next slide, please. Other one is manzil, which is the Qur'an is divided into 7 parts of equal length, and that is to allow a person to finish the khatma 1 per week. Right? So you have 7 parts, 1 part per day. Within 1 week, you finish a khatma. Now, this is where we have to look at ourselves and say, the recommendations of reading the Qur'an as a khatma, there are accounts where the Sahaba did it in 3 days, 7 days, but certainly should not be more than a month to do a khatma. So and I remind myself and everybody, obviously, of this, is because we are in the month of Ramadan, the month of the Qur'an, and it is a great opportunity to perhaps, you may not, if it takes you longer to read, there's no problem, but at least make it a personal goal that you're going to be doing a khatma of the Qur'an on a regular basis during the year. It could be that you're going from nothing to 1 or 2 per year, but try to work yourself, obviously, over time to read the Qur'an more and more. If we don't do anything during the year and we expect all of a sudden to do once a month, it's probably not a realistic approach. We should try to get it to once a month, but if you're not there or very far, start by making a goal of doing it, once every X months, and then, work towards improving that over time. And then the manazil here are different. So number 1 starts with Fatiha, number 2 would start with Surah Al-Ma'idah, number 3 with Surah Yunus, and so on. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. And we started, I'll take another maybe just 10 minutes to wrap up, and then we'll call it a day, inshallah. The language and the style of the Qur'an. So next slide, please. All right, so the Qur'an, we asked this before, I'm not going to spend too much time. Why is it in Arabic? Why is the Qur'an revealed in Arabic? إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. We have revealed it as an Arabic Qur'an so that you may understand. Yes? Of course, right? The Prophet it was in his tongue, and he is the messenger. So reason number 1, right? Why it's Arabic is because of the language of the Prophet. Why else? Right, so the Arabic language is very eloquent, and in terms of its eloquency and its, I would call it how rich it was, because we know in the Arabic language you can say a few things, you can say many things with a few words, right? We knew that about the Prophet ﷺ with his wisdoms. So that's another reason. Another reason, obviously, is that who is the Qur'an revealed to, like in terms of who is the audience? It's Quraysh, right? And these are the people of the Prophet ﷺ. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُم. That we have not revealed a prophet except it's in the same tongue as his people so that he can show them the clear signs. So that's why it's in Arabic. I have obviously ayat here that are, I think they deserve reflection. وَلَوْ جَعَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا أَعْجَمِيًّا لَقَالُوا لَوْلَا فُصِّلَتْ آيَاتُهُ أَعْجَمِيٌّ وَعَرَبِيٌّ. That we have revealed it if we had revealed it as a non-Arabic Qur'an, they would have certainly argued if only its verses were made clear. So they would have complained about lack of clarity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ هُوَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا هُدًى وَشِفَاءً. شِفَاء. That this is revealed, this Qur'an is revealed to those who believe as a guide and as a healing. Right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, وَكَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لِتُنذِرَ أُمَّ الْقُرَى وَمَنْ حَوْلَهَا. We have revealed to you a Qur'an in Arabic so that you may warn al-Qura. What's al-Qura? Mecca, right? al-Qura is Mecca, basically the mother of the cities, right? And everybody around it. Now, we talked about the Qur'an definition, if you remember. Remember, there were some words, we said there's difference of opinion, that all of them are, some scholars have said some of the words are not Arabic in nature, and some have said, no, it's all Arabic, right? So those who say it's all Arabic are saying, yeah, there are words that came from different parts of the world or languages, but they've been part of the Arabic language way before, obviously, in the Meccan period of the Prophet ﷺ, and they've become as part of the Arabic language. So they're actually they're Arabic words used by Arabs. So example is غسق, the word غسق. It's derived from the Turkish language. Sijil is derived from the Persian language. Qistas, derived from the Greek language. At-Tur, Syriac language. Kifl, Al-Kifl, Abyssinian language. Okay? But of course, again, based on the opinion we talked about, that says they're words that came from other places, but because the Qur'an is Arabic, these words are words that were used at the Arabs at the time. It's become part of their language, and the Qur'an, that doesn't make the Qur'an non-Arab. Okay? Any questions on that? Next slide, please. Okay, there we go. Yes, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, so I need your attention for the next 5 minutes, because this is where we start to get a little bit more into the text itself, okay? And I'll close with this, inshallah, so it's not too dense. But the Qur'an was revealed in the eloquent Arabic language. So for somebody to understand the Qur'an or appreciate it, he or she must be knowledgeable in various aspects related to the Arabic language. So how words give a particular meaning, okay? So when we talk about am versus khas, general or specific in meaning, mutlaq or muqayyad, we're going to talk about those. How the word is used or the text is used. So haqiqi or majazi. How the text gives the desired meaning. So mantuq or mafhum. And other categories like muhkam and mutashabih, or nasikh and mansukh. These are different categories that somebody who is going to give interpretation of the Qur'an has to know these extremely well, and it's somebody who is a scholar in the Arabic language. Okay? So there are conditions to be able to interpret the Qur'an. You can reflect on the Qur'an. We'll talk about that. How much reflection do I do versus interpretation? We'll cover that, inshallah, when we talk about tafsir. But know that when you read ayat, the words and the ayat are classified into different categories of how to understand the text. Okay? And one particular breakdown is what I will, we'll talk about today is al-muhkam and al-mutashabih. Al-muhkam and al-mutashabih. First, before we go there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alif Lam Ra, tilka ayatul kitab al-hakim. Tilka ayatul kitab al-hakim. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is referring to ayat of the book rich in wisdom. Kitab Hakim. Right? Allah also says, so the word Hakim, okay? ألف لام را كتاب أحكمت آياته ثم فصلت من لدن حكيم خبير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this book whose verses are perfected and then fully explained. So you see here, أحكمت is talking about perfection, right? Or comes from hikmah, wisdom, okay? Allah is saying here is the whole Quran is clear. It's a perfect book which has a criterion of the good and the bad, good and the versus evil, okay? Allahu nazzala ahsan al-hadithi kitaban mutashabihan. Now you have the other word that I'm talking about. So we talk about uhkimat, right? Perfection. And then now mutashabihan. Mutashabih here in this case is a book that's perfect consistency with repeated lessons. Okay? So mutashabih in this ayah is referring to how the Quran resembles or complements, ayat complement each other in eloquency, in beauty, in beliefs, in law, and there's no contradiction. Okay? This is the concept of muhkamat and mutashabihat. Okay? It's 3:20. This topic's probably, if I want to do it justice, it's probably going to take at least 10-15 minutes. And it's pretty, I would say, maybe getting more dense. So what we'll do, inshallah, is we'll close for today. And we'll start next week, inshallah, at 2 o'clock. I apologize for the late start. I think we figured out at least some of these technical issues so they don't repeat themselves. But please be on time next week, inshallah, at 2, so we don't take past, my goal is to no later than 3:15, inshallah ta'ala, if we start on time. Any questions before we close? Wonderful. So I've gotten everybody's assignments, who submitted, who didn't submit, need to talk to me because it's mandatory to submit the assignments. We have a midterm coming up, but what I might do is I might just do it after Ramadan to give you time just during Ramadan to study. Again, the Quran Ramadan is the month of the Quran, so to say, we're not going to learn about the Quran during this month, to me, just doesn't sound right. And this is why we still have these halaqat. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for coming here during your fast. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.